My dad got violent during a visit, I got sick for a month, and my boyfriend felt overwhelmed by my struggles. Can I count on him? Hello, everyone. I have been experiencing some challenging times lately, particularly concerning my family, employment, mental well-being, and navigating my new relationship with my boyfriend. We have been getting to know one another since July of last year and officially began dating in September 2024, with the boyfriend-girlfriend label following in October 2024. Although our relationship is relatively short, it has brought me considerable happiness. However, there are certain issues we need to address. If we do not resolve them, I am worried that I may have to end the relationship. Initially, everything was fantastic. I believe this is the healthiest relationship I have had in my life, but problems have emerged, and I am contemplating whether I need to terminate the relationship because of the current difficulties. To comprehend the difficult period I have put my current boyfriend through, it is essential to understand a bit about my past. I endured emotional abuse at the hands of two narcissistic parents during my upbringing. This involved constant criticism from both parents, sporadic violence from my father, 59 years old, and the burden of continually having to regulate my emotions, effectively making me a caregiver for both parents, who insist on treating me like a child even in my 30s. When I was in my mid-20s, I was romantically pursued and assaulted by a manager at work, 33 years old when I was 25, who was polyamorous. After the first assault, he became my boyfriend since I lost my virginity to him. He was exceedingly narcissistic, manipulative, charismatic, antagonistic, and polarizing. I was trapped in a very abusive emotional situation for 2.5 years. The aftermath was detrimental. I lost most of my friends and was left with severe PTSD, depression, and anxiety. It was a difficult time, and those who witnessed my struggles recognized the pain I was enduring, viewing me as emotionally resilient, with wisdom acquired over time. I share this background to illustrate the source of my sensitivity to abuse. Fast forward to 2 months ago when I visited my parents' house. During this visit, my father became extremely angry and volatile when I suggested we take turns speaking. Both of my parents directed false accusations toward me. In a fit of rage, my father threw a heavy chair against a glass desk. Although nothing broke, technically one wheel remained on the floor, the act of violence was threatening and deeply frightening. He screamed at me for 15 to 20 minutes, placing guilt on me for a mental health crisis I experienced the previous year. The following week, I was dry heaving and vomiting. I consumed approximately half of my usual food intake due to the nausea. I felt so unwell that I obtained a medical note excusing me from work for a month. My resting heart rate, as recorded by my Apple Watch, increased by 14 beats per minute and remained elevated for a month and a half. At that time, I was in the process of receiving a diagnosis for ADHD, which I now have. But the combination of ADHD symptoms and abuse from my family became so overwhelming that I lost my ability to focus. After the incident, I developed a persistent cough that lasted a full month. Despite all of this, I tried to handle the situation as best I could, but deep down, I was deeply upset and believed it would be wise not to see my family for the next 3 years, except in public environments. It felt like a separation from my parents. My mother conveyed that I was responsible for my father losing control, framing it as me rebelling against him and not allowing him to have his way. Even my brother, who typically remains level-headed, criticized me for escalating the situation. Despite the fact that all I did was request to take turns speaking and to point out inaccuracies in my father's claims while simply standing up for myself. I believe it was crucial for me to assert myself. It served as a warning that I would be very unwell if he did not cease, yet he did not stop, resulting in my severe illness for a month. I recognize that what I went through is difficult for anyone to endure, but right now, I am focused on understanding how this has impacted my relationship with my current boyfriend, 30 years old, and whether I am at fault in any way. During this challenging time, I was driving to see a psychiatrist located 2 hours away, who is part of a medical safe haven I accessed through a domestic violence recovery group in my hometown. This medical safe haven was the only resource I encountered that provided me with tools to overcome my PTSD, severe anxiety, and depression from 2020 to 2021. My psychiatrist at Kaiser refused to adjust my medication, which caused me to sleep for 12 hours a day, leading me to miss work. They also declined to evaluate me for ADHD because of my anxiety and their age limit for diagnoses. Moreover, even if I received a diagnosis, they would not prescribe a stimulant, as they feared it might trigger bipolar symptoms, despite my having experienced just one episode. Kaiser does not cover out-of-network care, so the medical safe haven allowed me to have some paid sessions. As a result, making the 2-hour commute for my medical care caused considerable stress for my boyfriend. My coughing was so severe that I occasionally struggled to breathe and required an emergency room visit during one of my trips. Due to my tendency to please others, I felt uncomfortable missing a wedding in Southern California the following day. Consequently, I flew down because it was too late to cancel my $600 hotel, and I did not want to explain my emergency room visit to my parents, nor did I wish to communicate that my illness was somewhat their fault. I do not regret attending the wedding, as I enjoyed spending time with my brother for a night. However, I do regret spending an excessive amount of money on clothing out of a sense of emotional emptiness. My health was poor, my mental state was fragile, and I felt I had no one to rely on. I struggled with the reality of not wanting to engage with my family. My boyfriend seemed stressed just interacting with me during that time. Shopping briefly lifted my spirits. I understand that I overextended myself, which was understandably concerning. Nevertheless, throughout this entire experience, my boyfriend became overly anxious discussing my situation and limited my ability to see him. He offered to visit me for a short time on the weekends, but would not permit me to drive to see him. This restriction added to my distress because I was not receiving the emotional support I needed for recovery. After my emergency room visit, I received a text from him indicating that people would understand if I missed events due to my medical emergency. However, if he truly wanted to convince me not to go, I wish he had taken the initiative to engage in a conversation with me and been willing to endure a phone call to discuss my reasoning for attending and encourage me to prioritize my well-being. I would have listened. I can be somewhat stubborn at times, but so can he. Instead, he remained quiet about his feelings and expectations, which only heightened my stress as he communicated that my distress impacted him negatively. Last night, he revisited the conversation and inquired whether the breakdown, sickness, and emotional turmoil I experienced might recur. I was taken aback by his question. I replied that it was unlikely, although I could not guarantee anything. I learned that I need to prioritize myself over pleasing others, so in future scenarios, attending a wedding the day after an emergency room visit is probably not on my agenda. After we discussed how my 2-hour trips to the psychiatrist were taking a toll on me, I started seeking a new psychiatrist closer to my home outside Kaiser, which should eliminate those long drives. However, I feel somewhat hurt because I believe my emotional struggles and heightened sensitivity to abuse were valid and warranted understanding. I did not sense that I was receiving emotional support from my boyfriend. Our conversations often conveyed that my issues were negatively affecting his well-being. To his credit, he did listen to some extent, but I felt immense guilt over how my struggles impacted him. While I understand his concerns stemmed from caring about me, I wish he had been more proactive in offering support. What I needed from him was reassurance of his availability to talk and work through my challenges together. I do appreciate feedback. He is particularly sensitive even to a 30-minute drive, while I possess greater endurance. He continually encouraged me to take care of myself, but I believed that was what I was attempting to do. Another reason I am contemplating a breakup at this stage is that we discussed how beneficial it would be for him to enhance his listening skills and ability to provide emotional support. He candidly stated, "I'm not good at that, I'm not going to lie." He elaborated that he is not professionally trained in offering such support. To me, this is not a valid justification. I am not a professional either, yet I have been a good listener since childhood and have provided emotional support to my friends. It is non-negotiable for me to have a partner who is reliable in offering emotional support. I do not receive it from my parents, and while I can occasionally obtain it from friends, I need to be with someone who is consistently available for me. If he encounters a work crisis or similar situation, I can cope on my own, but the emotional intimacy of sharing our hopes, dreams, fears, and learning from one another is essential to me. Additionally, both of us desire to have children, and if he cannot provide emotional support for me, I doubt he would be able to do so for a child. I feel that remaining with him long-term means I am just one crisis or medical emergency away from him possibly abandoning me or blaming me for causing him distress. He has been supportive in practical ways. For instance, I recently lost my job just 2 days after returning from medical leave. He has offered excellent advice about focusing on my own needs rather than engaging with dubious startups that do not compensate me fairly. He appears to still respect me despite my employment setback. He has also been covering all our meals, which is very generous given his financial situation. I want to give him a chance because I believe he genuinely cares. I recognize I can be somewhat stubborn about my decisions, yet I want my partner to express their concerns and discomfort. If something is significant to them and reasonable, I will do my best to accommodate their needs. I have spoken to a few friends about everything, and I believe the next steps involve discussing with him that even if he is not experienced in listening or providing emotional support, I need him to make an effort to improve. He likely has his own traumas that hinder his ability to cope with others' distress, but I would like to have a conversation to explore why that is the case. I tend to conclude my discussions about emotions positively. Gaining insights is incredibly invigorating for me. I am not seeking a platform to broadly share my traumas, but rather seeking fulfillment in reflecting on how to coexist with someone whose perspective I value. I acknowledge that I am not perfect in this situation. Am I doing anything wrong? While I can sometimes be stubborn, I endeavor to be a good listener. Does anyone have advice on managing my trauma and emotional challenges, particularly in relation to sensitive people? My boyfriend has shared that he found it jarring when I appeared fine and upbeat for an extended period only to hit a breaking point and experience a collapse all at once. I believe I am trying to be considerate of others by not burdening them with my problems, as it can be overwhelming, and not everyone is equipped to handle such emotional discussions. However, it takes me time to open up about negative experiences, and I tend to share more when I trust someone can handle the information without it adversely affecting their mental health. Any suggestions for managing my well-being would be greatly appreciated. In summary, my boyfriend, 30 years old, is very sensitive to stress. When I experienced an emotionally tumultuous period and became severely unwell, coughing excessively, after enduring abuse and threats from my father, 59 years old, my boyfriend became overwhelmed with concern for my sickness. I understand his worries, but I could not control my negative response to the renewed abuse. I am unsure whether I can rely on my boyfriend for emotional support and am questioning whether this relationship is worth maintaining. Story 2. I learned about a secret lawsuit and settlement against the HOA scam. Now, I'm reporting her to the IRS. She's in big trouble. Well, it seems that I need to include this statement. I do not grant permission for my posts to be read, interpreted, or published on any platform that is monetized or supported by advertisements. Examples of such platforms include YouTube and others. In short, if you profit from reading someone else's posts, I do not authorize you to profit from my posts. In the initial part of this saga, we are introduced to President Harpy, the supposed leader of the Not Really and Homeowners Association. Today, my wife and I had dinner with our friends, who were among the victims of this individual. I gained a significant amount of insight. I discovered much about the lawsuit that was initiated when I distributed letters indicating there was no actual homeowners association. In reality, there was a settlement to resolve the lawsuit. I must say, the Harpy hired an excellent attorney. One of the conditions of the settlement was that the total amount remained undisclosed, but our friends confirmed that they were compensated fully. Another provision of the settlement included a fairly strict non-disclosure agreement. I will need to start quite early in recounting this situation, as it sheds light on how everything transpired. The subdivision where Harpy resides was constructed in 2000. It turns out that, at the time the subdivision was built, she was the first person to purchase a property in this brand new neighborhood. The developer initially intended to establish a homeowners association properly, but due to delays in construction and home sales, they ultimately did not set it up. However, that didn't deter Miss Harpy at all. As soon as the next homeowners moved in, she approached them, saying, "Hello, welcome to the neighborhood. We are forming a neighborhood association, a voluntary homeowners association, if you will. This way, we can manage the common areas and maintain property values." The typical justifications for an homeowners association. After the first 5 to 6 houses were purchased and the owners settled in, agreeing to this voluntary association, the pitch shifted. It evolved from a neighborhood association to a direct, "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood. I am the president of the homeowners association, pleased to meet you." Most individuals accepted this. They assumed they had overlooked something in the disclosures, the property listing, or something similar. Yet this was a newly built subdivision, and at that time, it was nearly impossible to find a newly developed area without an homeowners association. A few people did pay attention. When confronted about it, she reverted to well, it's not truly an homeowners association. It is more of a voluntary neighborhood association. We do have some rules that everyone has agreed upon, which she created alone, and we do collect a small fee of $25 a month. That is not unreasonable, is it? This is merely to maintain the common areas, and the rules assist in preserving everyone's property values. All of this came to light during the depositions and testimonies in this lawsuit, and she successfully convinced them. Everyone signed the rules. She even labeled them as CC and Articus, arguing that this gave them legal weight for enforcing the rules, either under the guise of the homeowners association or the neighborhood association. By the time all the properties were initially sold, there were approximately 2 owners who believed it was a homeowners association for everyone who thought it was simply a voluntary association. As properties changed hands and new owners moved in, the pitch regarding the homeowners association became increasingly convincing. At the time of the lawsuit, it was approximately 3 to 4 individuals who believed it was an homeowners association for everyone who thought it was just a voluntary association. As testimonies were concluding, her attorney proposed a settlement. I learned from my neighbor that in this proposed agreement, the only individuals who would be made whole, in legal terms, were those who had signed under the belief that it was a legitimate homeowners association. Her attorney successfully persuaded the judge that individuals who joined the voluntary neighborhood association were not truly defrauded and thus could not participate in the settlement. This angered those individuals significantly. Due to the timing of everything collapsing around her, she had enough equity in her home to refinance her mortgage and pay the settlement amount. As a result, she had to reimburse many individuals directly, depleting the equity she had built up over the past decade. I suspect her husband was unaware of the scheme, as he was not one of the named parties in the lawsuit and filed for divorce amid the proceedings. As for his lack of awareness, I have no idea. Perhaps she convinced him that her commissions from real estate sales were exceptionally lucrative. I am uncertain about the terms of the divorce, but it was evidently quite contentious. Our friends noted that they frequently heard loud arguments emanating from the Harpy's residence during their walks around the neighborhood. Hopefully, this clarifies how she managed to deceive people. Our friends were among those who believed it was a legitimate homeowners association, and they recounted that she was so persuasive that they never questioned it. At least their belief meant they were compensated, even though they could not legally reveal the amount they received. Now, regarding more recent events, one topic we discussed this evening was our neighbors seeking advice from the district attorney about pursuing criminal charges. They communicated with the DA's office earlier today, and it seems that the statute of limitations has expired. For a crime of this nature, even though it would be classified as a felony, the statute of limitations lasts only 3 years. However, I passed on the suggestion to report her to the IRS. Since they were among those who incurred losses, I believe it is only fair that they benefit if there is a reward. They both appeared quite pleased with this idea. So yes, that should certainly be intriguing. One reason, I noted that the Harpy engaged a skilled attorney was because one condition of the non-disclosure agreement stipulated that if they signed on to the settlement, they agreed not to report her to any professional board or licensing agency. This indicates she was clearly concerned that such actions might, just possibly, affect her real estate license. It is unfortunate for her that I was not involved in that settlement. After my initial email to the state real estate agency, I received a reply this morning. After several more emails exchanged, I was interviewed over the phone by the head of the Professional Standards Division. They seemed very eager to hear my account. I provided a recorded statement on the assurance that it would remain confidential, to avoid her making my life difficult. During dinner tonight, I learned that our friends maintain a strong friendship with several individuals who were not compensated in the settlement agreement, as they had joined under the Voluntary Neighborhood Association. These individuals were the ones whom her attorney insisted were not defrauded, and therefore could not be included in the settlement. This means they are not protected by that irritating non-disclosure agreement. Before composing this update, I emailed the names and contact details for 3 of those owners still residing in the neighborhood to the head of the Professional Standards Division. While I had to contend with her madness and overall nuisance, I did not lose any money. However, the actual victims of her deceit, I believe their accounts will carry significantly more credibility with professional standards. I also included, purely for their convenience, the state court case number associated with the lawsuit. Who knows, they might be able to access the lawsuit records and terms of the settlement since they are a state agency. That, dear Redditors, brings us to the present moment. If I receive further updates, which I hope to do through my friends, I will happily share them here and will gladly answer any questions I can.